Brothers and sisters, how are you? And welcome to Readings with Regina. And I want to give a big shout out to all of my beloved subscribers. Thank you. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. Now, normally I get right into 18th and 19th century African American literature, but today I wanted to take a bit of a detour. Now we're going to review what we've read, but before I get into that review, I wanted to step into this current time period because it's a very important time period, and I want you to be able to relate the past to the present in a way that is helpful to your intellectual growth and development and the intellectual growth and development of your children. So what I want to do then is to talk a bit, before we get into the literature, Frederick Douglass, William Wells Brown, that we've been reading, and Dessa Rose. And I'm going to be quoting from Mumia Abu Jamal's book and Stephen Victoria's book, Murder Incorporated. Let me show it to you. Empire, Genocide, and Manifest Destiny. Now, those of you who've been with me from the beginning of this series, you know this book because I've been reading from it before, months ago. But I want to go back to it because right now you'll be able to actually see some of the things that Mumia and Stephen wrote in this book. For example, you might have heard political people talk about America exceptionalism, America exceptionalism, America exceptionalism. And you might have heard, in fact, President Trump mentioned this phrase in his inaugural speech. He mentioned manifest destiny. Dig. Manifest destiny means that the United States can just murder, rape, and steal whatever land that they want to, and it is all right. Why? Because God ordained it. That's manifest destiny. And these wars that we see the United States in right now, it has that same foundation of manifest destiny. And I wanted to take a little historical look with you all at the countries that the United States has committed regime change. Now, if you've been looking at the news, you will notice that President Trump talked about he wants to, change the regime in Iran. Now, Iran is a sovereign country. I think it's 90 million people. But they want regime change. They don't like the leader of Iran because Israel doesn't like the leader of Iran. And unless you are white and Christian, white America will come after you. And I can show you that historically. Now, I'm not even going to read this entire list, but these are the countries and the dates that the United States has interfered in the country, overthrew their leader, or started a war. And as I read to you these countries, I also want you to remember right now that we are living through a genocide. And here's something that I thought about the other night. Those of you, my listeners who are Christian, do you understand that Jesus was a Palestinian? You understand that's the land of Jesus? Look it up. And the children are starving, and the women are starving, and the men are starving, and aid workers have been killed by the Israelis. So I'm going to just read a few of the countries that over time America has interfered or overthrown their leaders. China, 1949 to early 1960s. Albania, 1949 to 1953. East Germany, 1950s. Iran, 1953, when they put in the Shah. Guatemala, 1954. Costa Rica, 1950s. Syria, 1956 to 7, Egypt 1957, Indonesia 1957 to 8, British Guiana 1953 to 64, Iraq 1963, North Vietnam 1945 to 1973, Cambodia 1955 to 1970, Laos 1958, 1959, 1960, Ecuador 1960 to 63, Congo. If you don't know Patrice Lumumba, look him up. The Congo 1960, Brazil 1962 to 64, Dominican Republic 1963, Cuba 1959 to the present. Now, check this out. There are more countries here. I'm just not going to read them all. But I wanted you to have an example of what the United States has done since it became the United States. We are indeed a very powerful country. No doubt about it. Check this out. The United States has 750, maybe even 800, but 750 military bases all around the world. By the way, if you see me doing like this, I'm trying to minimize the glare in my eyeglasses. Anyway, the United States has between 750 and 800 military bases worldwide. China has 1. Russia has 20. So you could see why other countries are very leery of the United States, because the United States will bomb you to hell. Take your resources, like they did in Vietnam, like they did in all the other countries that I mentioned. See, I lived through Vietnam. That's why it's very close to me. You see? You see? And so now, the United States' greatest ally, they say, which is Israel, which became a country in 1948, the Palestinians, for the most part, welcomed them, but then they lost their land. Like the Native Americans welcomed the French, the English, the Spanish. And where are the Native Americans now? Where are they? So the United States likes to keep that element of fear. If you read President Trump's tweets or listen to certain news outlets, for example, George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows, I sincerely encourage you to listen to George Galloway. He comes on Wednesday and he'll be on Sunday as well. Or Garland Nixon, or any ex-military person that has gone rogue, like Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter was one of the first people to say there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. President Bush knew there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Biden knew there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but we went to war anyway. And I've told you before, many of these war lovers, they're vampires. They love blood. They don't even think about the killing of the young men who are going to be killed. They will send them to their slaughter. So what is that? What is that? That is blood lust. I don't want to see any mother's son be wounded or killed in war. Why in the world can't the United States learn to live together? Why is that? Iran did not bomb Israel first. Israel bombed Iran and then dragged the United States, our greatest ally is Israel, they say, into a war, which means that all of these military bases in the Middle East, those soldiers were at risk. Lord have mercy. But it does seem, I hope, that it's winding down now, because Iran had something for them. They don't even have a nuclear weapon. They got something for them. Okay? So I needed to go there because America itself, the country in which we are living, began in genocide. And it's always covered up. But you can't grow if you don't know certain things. You can't grow intellectually. You'll be caught up in the madness of American culture, and it is mad. Okay? And here's something else, and I said this, I believe, in our last episode. The Iranians are Muslim, a particular kind of Muslim, I believe Shia. They don't want a nuclear bomb because they don't want to destroy the earth. Now, how you like that? Now, if I know that, you know, doggone the Pentagon knows that, you know, doggone the president and his cabinet, they know this. But they've been pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing the same way they did Iraq. Many white people in charge and their black lackeys love war. Barack Obama bombed Libya. He's the only president that ever bombed and regime changed an African country. Destabilized. It's still destabilized to this day. The Libyans hadn't done anything to the Americans. In fact, the Libyans had given up their arms. How do you like that? How do you like that? All right. I've given you my position on where we are right up to today in the United States of America. Now, I'm going to get into the subject of today's Readings with Regina. And that subject is power shifts, Black and white males during enslavement. And we're going to review now. One of the earliest books that we read of a Black male, 1845, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. And I also want those who are listening to me to put in the comments what you recall about the dynamics of Black males during enslavement. We're going to get to the white males as well, but I wanted to start with Black males during enslavement. So here's a few things that I jotted down. And again, those of you listening to me, I want you to make a comment. If you listen to me once this episode is over, still write a comment on what you learned about Black men during enslavement in America. So we started with Frederick Douglass, 1845. Now, this is what we learned about the Black male in the Narrative of Frederick Douglass, that during slavery, a white male could kill a Black male and do no jail time. A white male could kill a Black male and do no jail time. Many of you might remember that episode. It was, in fact, an enslaved brother who did not respond smilingly at his master. In fact, he had a bit of an attitude when the master asked him to do something, and the master shot him dead. Okay, so we learned that. We also learned that during slavery, you could starve a slave. Remember those two women in particular that were so frail? And even Fred himself sometimes would go out and pick up garbage from the street to eat it because he was hungry. Do you remember in Frederick Douglass that the children, they wore a sack, no underwear, and they were fed from a trowel, Trough. Look it up. A trowel is what horses drink from. A trowel is what pigs eat from. And they would eat with pieces of shell that they found. This is how enslaved children would eat. We learn in Frederick Douglass that masters would indeed sell their own children, their children that they normally made through rape. Okay. We learned through Frederick Douglass that a master, male, could beat an enslaved female. Because you might remember when Fred was a little boy, he watched his Aunt Hester be whipped. It traumatized him. Because now this is the 19th century, and women wore dresses down to their ankles and up to their neck, you dig? And the master pulled down the top part of his Aunt Hester's dress and beat her unmercifully in the back. And Fred Douglass was watching this. Slaves had no authority. If you're a slave, you have no authority. Slaves were shared with family members. You dig? You remember that one master died? He would, invite his, well, if he's dead, he can't invite, but the other remainders in the family or other family members, cousins, uncles, whatever, would come and look over the slave property and decide which ones they wanted. Of course, you know this, but I'm going to mention it because we learned about it. Mothers were separated from their children. 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 And God only knows who your father was. The politicians sanctioned slavery. Very important. Politicians sanctioned slavery. Okay? It was legal. It was the law. So an enslaver could do whatever he wanted to do with his property because Black people were not considered people. Black people were considered property. Now, another important thing that I remember from my readings is what I'm about to share with you. This happened between William Wells Brown and Frederick Douglass. Free, F-R-E-E. Free Black women married enslaved men. Remember Sandy, who gave Frederick Douglass the root and said, hold on to that root, put it on your right side, and no white man is ever going to beat you? Okay? And from that root, Frederick Douglass got courage and beat the bejesus out of the Negro breaker, Mr. Covey. Now, I didn't say this before, but I'm going to say it now. One of the reasons that I'm even doing this review is because we're moving from Frederick Douglass to other books, okay? And Frederick Douglass married a free Black woman. And her name was Anna, she helped him to escape bondage. And Frederick Douglass became a fabulous speaker worldwide. So you could look up Fred on the internet. And as we approach July, look up his speech on July 4th. What does it mean to the slave? So Frederick Douglass, like William Wells Brown, became a very famous abolitionist and orator. All right? Now, that's what we learn in the narrative of Frederick Douglass. Now, what did we learn in the narrative of William Wells Brown? Again, I'm staying with Black men. 1850, is it 1853 or 1858? I think it's 1853. William Wells Brown wrote his narrative in 1853. Okay, this is what we learn in the narrative of William Wells Brown. Masters named their slaves. White fathers, uncles, cousins of slaves kept them in bondage. You'd be passed from one family member to another. Slaves were sold to satisfy debts. If you had a debt, say you had a mortgage on a property, oh Lord have mercy. Okay, you could sell your slave and reduce the amount of your mortgage. Oh yes. Slaves were rented out to other whites. Remember William Wells Brown was rented out? He was rented out to a ship's captain. And the monies would go back to the original enslaver. White masters who were really nothing but pimps, pimps. They'll show you pimps in black exploitative movies, but the original pimp was a white enslaver. Oh, yes. Now, these white enslaver pimps, they would buy pretty black girls, okay, and keep a stable of women. And then, of course, they would have white men come and pay for the women's services. Now, check this. These women were not prostitutes because they really didn't get any of the money. So these women were taught to be whores. You just give it up. You give it up to whoever comes your way. So the original pimp was a white dude. Understand that. But of course, in black culture, the pimps are normally black. And black people, black men stepped inside of that kind of job. I'll put it like that. Okay. Slaves worked in the field, in the house, in a doctor's office, in a lawyer's office, in a post office, and all of the in carpentry, in ironworks. But this is what you must always remember: the enslaved male worked for free. Is that? Hello, sweetheart. Yes, and thank you for being here, my dear. All right, so here we go. Yes, all of these labors, you name them, doctor's assistant, paralegal, whatever, the brothers and sisters, it was mostly brothers, did not get paid. So when they were apprentices, if you will, it was the person in charge who got all the money, not the person doing the jobs. All right, so what else? Okay, also, these particular jobs were created. Bounty hunters, they went looking for slaves who had escaped. Negro drivers, because there would be black and white, what they called Negro drivers. These were men who were in charge of making sure that the free labor kept on free laboring. Okay, and you had to keep up a certain pace, right? Or you would be whipped. Okay, there were Negro dogs. I've told you about Negro dogs that had to be trained. They had to be trained. They were dogs that were trained to run after and bite and collect black people who were runaways. And I'm going to tell you all once again how these dogs were trained, because it blew my mind when I realized this, when I did the research. The dogs were trained like this. The trainers would starve the dogs. Then they would present before the dogs a mannequin of a black man. Within that mannequin, probably made of straw, they put meat in the mannequin's middle. So that meant the starving dogs would go for the middle of the mannequin, because that's where the meat was. So when those Negro dogs were sent after a real person, that's what they went for. But I just want to say this to you too. They did not always get their captive, because black people knew about roots that would stave off those Negro dogs. But nevertheless, Negro dog training was a job in America. That's the point that I want to get over to you. Okay. Enslaved people worked for food and lodging. Families were separated one from the other. A slave could be killed on command. A slave could be killed on command. You might remember in William Wells Brown's book, when William was a little boy aboard that steamer, and a black man came running down the wharf. I didn't steal the meat. I didn't steal the meat. I didn't steal the meat. And it was a group of white men running after him. And he jumped into the water. And the white men beat him with a pole. and then dragged him out the water and said, he ain't really dead. He was dead. He was dead. Okay. Now, those are some of the things I jotted down that Black men went through during slavery. Now I'm going to show you or share with you the transformation of white men during slavery. Once again, those of you listening to me, I want you to jot down what you remember from Frederick Douglass, from William Wells Brown, and from Blake or the Huts of America. Okay? Now, this is what white enslavers turned into during slavery. They had full control of a slave. So that indeed gave them a great sense of authority and power because they had complete control of Black people. They could rape any woman that they chose to rape, or man, but rape any woman that they chose to rape. Now, let me even expound on the issue of rape. White enslavers could also breed, B-R-E-E-D, a Black couple. They might want a certain kind of a look of a child that would bring more sales. So they could take that man over there and this woman over here and say, y'all get together and do the do. Produce a child. Frederick Douglass went through that too. So did William. He saw that, the breeding of the Black woman. Slaves were definitely property. Buy and sell them. Slaves were considered animals by law. That's why politics is important. By law. A white enslaver could just beat a slave. Let's say he had a hard day doing whatever it is he do, right? Well, he could always come home and, he could, how you punch it bad? He could punch his slaves. And that would be all right. Grown slaves were treated like children. White enslavers who were into medicines, doctors, whatever, they could experiment on slaves. And they did. In fact, there's a book I don't have a picture of, but it's called Medical Apartheid. All of you women out there, listen to me. If you've ever gotten a gynecological test and they put them tongues, where, Black women their bodies were broken. Enslaved Black women had broken bodies in that private area as doctors in the 19th century were experimenting on how to make gynecological instruments. They used the Black woman, not a dead Black woman, a live one. Okay? Slave, if you're a white enslaver, you could punish your slaves. Whenever you felt like it, you could, in fact, humiliate your slaves. White was right. White males made all the rules. God was white. Okay? And this is a complex that absolutely still affects Black people today. Because the Christianity that was taught back then, of course, God was white. But I just told you, the real Jesus, he was Palestinian. The Palestinians that are being, starved today, killed today, bombed today, houses stolen from them today, body Israelis. And the United States is the Israelis' greatest ally. Anyway, I digress. If you were an enslaver, somebody cooked for you. You had cooks that were Black. Slaves were not considered people. And in Manifest Destiny, which I mentioned when I opened this program, God sanctioned slavery. God wanted slavery. This was in the Bible. This is what enslavers believed. Now, in Manifest Destiny also, which is the rubric under which America still lives, if a country does not have guns, now it was guns during the enslavement period. Now it's bombs during the period in which we're living now. But if a people during slavery did not have guns, well, they were considered stupid. They were considered animals. And the stealing of their land was something that God wanted the superior white man and his woman to do. That is Manifest Destiny. And actually, we're still living under that American exceptionalism. I'm going to repeat what I said to you earlier in this program. America has 750 to 800 military bases worldwide. China has 1. Russia has 20, maybe 21. That's it. Yet if you look at the mainstream news, you would think these countries had bombs coming out of their ears, out of their rivers. Oh, they're so terrible. We got to take them down. Why? I want you to think back too on capitalism and the making of America. That particular book that I read to you months ago. Brothers and sisters, it has been delightful to be with you. I love to do a review. Whenever you read a book, you should do a review of that book. You can even write out specific points that meant something to you from that book. Reading increases your intellectualism, and that's what I want. Because the oligarchs that run this country want you stupid. They don't want you to understand the ruthless truth of what they are doing. Okay, I'm going to close out now. Remember, I pray for all of you because I believe in the power of prayer. And I do this series, Reading with Regina, because I love my people. Okay? All good people. And I don't like war at all. We used to say in the 60s and 70s, make love, not war. Okay? Why not? So, know that you are wonderful. Know that I love you. Always help somebody that you can who needs your help. And I will see you this Thursday. Same time, same place. This is Readings with Regina, and I'm signing off right now. Bye now.